just heard from the band AJR, 100 bad days makes 100 good stories. And 100 good stories makes you interesting at parties. You guys, I am so interesting at parties. Not because I'm particularly engaging, but because I've had a lot of bad days. So for the next 18 minutes of this party, I'm going to tell you about these bad days. I will also tell you how these bad days translated into a financial scarcity mindset, some of the problems and research that's come out around financial scarcity mindsets, and tips to overcome the associated challenges. But first, I have a question. Have you ever hidden money? Yes. I'm talking a few bills stashed in an envelope, maybe tucked into your sock drawer, or hidden at the very bottom of that box of tampons. That was my mom's favorite hiding place. Please raise your hand if you have. Oh, thank you. I feel so much less alone right now. So I asked this question because I've hidden money. My hiding place was a tiny compartment in my wallet, and I hid money from myself in my late teens through my early 20s. I hid money because I was a professional tennis player. Stay with me here. And this was a very expensive career choice. I was traveling 40 weeks a year, all over the world, paying for all of my own flights, hotels, and meals. And I was doing this without any family support. I call this stage of my life gallivanting without adult supervision, which most at this age should not be allowed to do, present company included, and soon you'll see why. In the years that I was gallivanting, I also never knew how much money I would make. There were weeks where I'd make $10,000, and that was so much fun, but it was a little too rare. There are other weeks where I would clear $10, and it was this whole never knowing how much money I'd have coming in that led to me hiding money. There's one story that I remember when I think about this season of life. I was 19, and I was at a tournament in Italy. I'd had an awesome week. I'd won several big matches. I was walking away with a $5,000 prize money check. And I had an entire weekend in Rome to do whatever I wanted. I should have been on top of the world, but I had a problem. I had just emptied my bank account booking my bus back to the city. And I kind of knew this would happen. I was running low on money, but I had it all figured out, per usual, right? I was planning on taking my prize money check, going to the bank and cashing it. This was my strategic master plan. I was banking on it, pun intended. What I hadn't thought about was the fact that all the banks had closed early because we were heading into an international holiday. We were heading into Easter weekend. And by the time the banks would reopen, I'd be on a plane back to America. And I didn't have money to eat in the meantime. This wasn't a fun headspace to be in. But luckily on this occasion, things resolved themselves pretty quickly because a few hours later, I was digging through my wallet, honestly I'd totally forgotten about my little stash of cash. I have no idea what I was looking for when I zipped open that little compartment and found a $100 bill. The relief that I felt was visceral. I had tears in my eyes, and the only coherent thought that I could manage was the fact that I could order a tomato mozzarella salad for dinner that night. So over the years, I would have a few too many of these experiences. Times where I would book a ticket, land in a foreign country, and be overcome by the stress of knowing that I had to win and win a lot just to buy a ticket home. There are times I would check into a hotel and pray that the tournament per diem would cover my stay by the time I was ready to leave. I'd voluntarily overdraw a checking account to get myself through a rough period that I knew that was coming. And it wasn't until a few years ago when I discovered the concept of financial independence and this amazing community that I learned the language for my experiences, first as actual financial scarcity, and then later as a financial scarcity mindset, as I continued to feel worry and fear around money, even after I started to have it. So this realization inspired me to dig deeper and to understand why I thought about money the way that I did and why I had so much fear around it. So I soon realized that the roots of my financial scarcity mindset had set in when I was a child, which makes so much sense because there's so many studies that show that most of our financial habits are set in place by the time we are 7. By the time I was 7, I knew financial scarcity because I knew domestic violence. Domestic violence is about 2 things. It is about 1, asserting power, while 2, establishing control. There are many ways to establish control. There's isolation, manipulation, intimidation, but rarely is economic abuse discussed. Without access to money, a survivor's options become extremely limited. It can then become the reason that they stay, and it became the reason that we stayed. So long before I forgot about international holidays and booked one-way tickets to foreign countries, I had already learned that really bad things could happen if you didn't have enough money. All right, I hope there's some Jocko Willink and extreme ownership fans in the room because I'm a big one. For those of you who aren't aware of the principle of extreme ownership, it's about owning your shit, every piece of it, and making 0 excuses. This principle really helped me in turning my life around, my financial life. And it was this principle that I applied and that really resonated with me when I left my sport, because I was 100% done feeling poor, broke, and scared. And I realized that I had no more excuses for my financial situation anymore. So the laser-like focus that I learned while training to be an elite athlete was then applied to becoming successful so that I could make it rain with the dollar bills that would surely follow. I first implemented extreme ownership by working as much as humanly possible. I held at least 2 jobs during undergrad, usually more. There was prescriptive advice floating around me about how to be successful. So I did all of it. I chased the jobs, the grades, the degrees, the internships, paid and unpaid, the presentations, anything that I could do to get ahead. Within 6 years of leaving undergrad, I had a 6-figure base salary, bonuses, multiple homes, a paid-off car, and I'd figured out how to live in the Midwest while still earning a Boston finance salary. So from the outside looking in, I was crushing. Finally. And this was the life that I dreamed of when I was bartending and sleeping in my car in between shifts. But even though I knew that I was where I wanted to be, it still felt terrible. I still felt so much fear. A small part of this I blame on starting a real estate business because it's very expensive. There's money coming in, but there's always so much money going out. And it was the money that I was spending that continued to make me feel like I was out of control, no matter how well my business was doing or how it was growing. Thankfully, I finally had my moment of what is actually happening here. This happened shortly after I found myself in my car on the phone with my best friend, sobbing hysterically. So I've been dealing with the money pit of a house and the tenant from hell, and my property manager had gotten her contractor to go to the house and put together a holistic scope of work so that we could get this place back on track. He then sent over multiple estimates, all of which ranged between $30,000 and $50,000, and all of which involved tearing off the entire roof of the home, rebuilding a portion of it, while the tenant was still living there in the winter. So I could have just said, okay, this guy's either dumb, insane, or a total opportunist, and I'm gonna get another bid, like I had so many times before. But I decided to take a different path this time. I decided to spiral. And that was what led to me crying in my car, the fact that I felt like this home was going to ruin me, and I felt so helpless. So I was in my car, and then I put on my COVID mask, kept crying, and just started wandering through Home Depot behind my mask. It was probably not one of my best moments, not even close. But you know what? That moment needed to happen, because it was in the aftermath that I realized I had a problem. And the solution to my problem was not how to make more money. What I needed to do was understand my financial scarcity mindset, how it was impacting me, and I needed to figure out how to deal with it. Luckily, there's been a lot more research around the topic of financial stress and financial scarcity mindsets and their impact on physical and mental health. There was a study that came out from the University of Switzerland last year that followed 20,000 people over 20 years. And it reported that many people who felt financial scarcity also reported feeling less physically healthy and more mentally depressed. And there are a whole host of other studies coming out that show a relationship between the elevated cortisol levels accompanying financial stress and conditions like heart disease, diabetes, and impaired decision-making. And that Swiss study that I mentioned, another interesting piece that came out of that was the fact that it reported that many of those in lower income brackets actually did not report feeling financial scarcity, while many of those in higher income brackets did. So what we are talking about here is perceived insufficiency, not actual insufficiency. We're talking about the impact of how you feel about how much you have, not how little or how much is actually in your bank account or your wallet. So I spent, the last 10 minutes telling you guys about some of my bad days, and it makes sense that these bad days would have a lasting and traumatic impact on me, because some of them are a little bit more on the extreme end of the spectrum. But it's also really important to recognize that circumstances don't have to be extreme in order to be impactful. According to the Financial Health Institute, even moderate amounts of stress can break down a person's resilience. And financial stress can come about even if you're a little bit worried about your job or question your ability to meet your financial goals, which I know is a scenario that resonates with many of us. And let's not forget, many of our financial attitudes and habits are set in place when we're children. So if our parents or our grandparents ever worried about money, chances are their attitudes, beliefs, and biases would likely have been passed on to us. So fast forward a few years now, and I am in a much better place with my money and my life, thanks to the work I've done on myself. There were two areas that I needed to take on in order to improve my scarcity mindset. One, the thoughts running through my head. And I also needed an action plan. When it came to remapping my thoughts, abundance and gratitude were really the pieces that helped me the most. Abundance was super hard, probably because it's the farthest polar opposite of financial scarcity. And it still gets difficult sometimes. What helps me the most on those days where I have trouble recentering myself around abundance is to actually think about my cash inflows and outflows. Think about what I have coming in from my business, from my job. Compare that to the next few months in living expenses, business expenses, and show myself that I'm gonna be okay. It's hard for the fear to continue living when you can prove to yourself that you are okay and that you will be able to take care of yourself. It also helps to feel lucky for what I have. There were times where I didn't know how I was going to feed myself or put a roof over my head. So today, walking out of a grocery store, clutching a non-organic, basic-ass carton of eggs that cost me $23, and then not have to worry too much about how I'm going to afford it, that's luxury. And I really like to lean into those moments and feel grateful for the peace of mind that I have and the fact that I don't have to worry. Because it's hard to worry about not having enough when you are feeling so good about what you do have. Moving on to the action plan. So there's a super cool exercise called fear setting. Tim Ferriss gave a TED Talk on this on YouTube, and I highly recommend looking it up to get the full impact because we're only going to be talking about a small piece of it. In the piece that we're going to be talking about today, his first call to action is for us to move away from something that I know that we are all good at, which is defining our goals. We know what we want. That is not the problem. Instead, he wants us to define our fears. Make a list. Envision them in detail. Feel them out. Then he wants us to think about what it would take to prevent this from happening, or at least decrease the chances of it from taking place. Lastly, he wants us to think about repairing them. If what we fear most comes to life, what are we going to do? Define, prevent, repair. For me, it looked like coming to terms with the fact that my actual fear, what was driving me, was the fear that I would end up homeless, that I wouldn't be able to take care of myself, and that I'd find myself in a situation where my physical safety would be compromised. Again. Preventing looked like learning how to invest intelligently and save diligently. And repairing looked like knowing how to pivot in my real estate investments or any of my other investments so that if I had to generate cash relatively quickly to stay afloat, I could. The last piece is absolutely critical. We all need friends. The money journey isn't the easiest one. And we all need people who will remind us to think with abundance, who will be the counterbalance and sanity check that we need at times. And hearing others' journeys will also help us feel more validated and less alone. So all those years ago, I was hiding money in an effort to hold on to it. But what I was really holding on to were my fears and my worries, and these fears and worries would keep me from living a happy and healthy life, no matter how much I eventually earned. Now I keep that spot in my wallet empty, because I know that I have what I need, even if that means I have fewer bad days and I'm less interesting at parties. And I know that you have what you need. So in the spirit of moving from a financially scarce mindset to a financially abundant mindset, here's a list of organizations that you can take a picture of and donate to that will help. These organizations will help those dealing with very real challenges as they relate to actual financial scarcity. Thank you.